Sorry, good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely fine. I don't want you to worry about me for a second. The fact that I've got my leg up and I'm very grumpy. So I'd have no preamble whatsoever to this meeting. So I trust that everybody has read the papers and that we're going to have a fantastical discussion. And I welcome the substitutes and people that have taken the trouble to come. So welcome Ian and Andrew. And we will start with Sederunt and apology.
Thank you, Chair. We've got 3 apologies today from Councillors Brodie, Sloan and Carruthers. We've got Councillor Howie here on behalf of Richard Brodie, Councillor Justy here on behalf of Ian Carruthers, and Councillor Wilson here on behalf of Councillor Sloan.
Thank you very much. Members, any declaration of interest? Thank you very much. We'll go on to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting, which was on the 13th of March 2018, for noting. Noted. We'll move on to item 4. This report's asking us to consider a revised member and officer protocol, and members are asked to consider a revised member officer protocol and make recommendations to full council. I'll hand over to discussion.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few points I made. 2.7, it says an officer should not raise with a member matters relating to the conduct or capability of another officer or the internal management of a service. I'm just interested to know, where does that sit in line with the Council's whistleblowing policy? You know, there was a serious matter of criminality. I think that we would all agree it would be in the interest of the Corporate Council to have that reported, at least in private, to members so that it can be actioned upon. And also, just as a matter of interest, 3.2, it says that attendance at meetings of political groups is voluntary for officers and must be authorised by the Chief Executive or in his absence, the proper officer. Just wondering, so earlier on in that paragraph, it talks about how, you know, councillors have, all elected members have the right to speak to officers on matters of council business. Does the Chief Executive authorising the attendance of officers at a political group not go against that? And is there any occasion when the Chief Executive has rejected to an officer being in attendance at a political group meeting?
Claire, Rona? Point up.
I was just wanting to give a bit of proof on the Chief Exec actually refused the Conservative group a meeting with Claire Renton back in the beginning of the North West Community Campus issue. We asked for officers to come to the group meeting and we were refused.
It was just on the first point, really getting to 2.7 about the whistleblowing, which there is a whistleblowing policy, but I'm wondering, would it be appropriate even for issues like that to be reported to members and before they'd actually gone through whatever the process was to determine whether there was an actual issue of substance, you know, rather than you would expect that the conclusion of that would then be presented to members if there was a determination of members required, as opposed to just reporting to members as a matter of course. So it's just maybe, I think maybe just a wee bit of clarity about what this member officer protocol means in terms of the existing arrangements for whistleblowing.
I'll hand over to Rona. I'm wondering, it might be useful for us to actually see the whistleblowing policy. I know we can look it up, but it would be useful to have a copy.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, the member officer protocol is really how we govern day-to-day relationships. It's not concentrate on the extraordinary that might happen. It's just the day-to-day relations between members and officers. But in the example, you know, that was given, you know, that sort of concern, yes, there's a whistleblowing policy. There's also a managerial order that people can go through in their own services. There's a chief internal auditor, an internal audit manager, and there's also a monitoring officer. So these are all the safeguards that you've got in your system. Obviously, if you felt all of these were, if a person felt all of these were closed down, then I could see a situation where an officer might raise someone with a member. But it's really to discourage that sort of discussion, which I think would be, on the whole, inappropriate.
Stephen?
There was just listening to other members, there was an issue about the chief executive involvement in determining whether or not officers should attend groups.
Yeah, and a request for someone to attend a meeting would, the requirement on an officer would be that they let their manager, their head of service, their director know that they've been requested, and then that request will be discussed at the most senior level in the council, and if that's thought to be inappropriate, yeah, then the chief executive has the last say.
Adam?
I think that's just reading through the protocol. There certainly is there's an openness, a transparency running through that. If an elected member wants to talk to an officer about the business of the council, it's very much yes. And certainly I was pleased to read the way in which, even if there's a public meeting organised by elected members, the expectation is that officers will attend a public meeting. Similarly, you would expect that if a political group, which is a collection of elected members, want to speak to an officer of the council from any directorate, that the chief executive shouldn't really have a veto over that. He wouldn't have a veto over an elected member going to speak to a director or any officer of the council. So why is that veto at political group level?
I don't think there'll ever have been, you might tell me otherwise, but I don't think there'll ever been an occasion where a director or a head of service has ever refused to attend a political group meeting. So a lot of this is about the level of the officer in the organisation, and whether it's appropriate or not that person speaks for the service to the political group. So I think it's aimed at directors and heads of service, and I think they would always come to your meetings, or the chief executive.
I know of an occasion where an officer was told not to attend any political group meeting, and no explanation was given to elected members at the time. However, in the hours and days afterwards, it became apparent as to what had happened, and that was a very significant event in council business, and one that, quite rightly, elected members of all colours wanted to ask about.
Thank you, Adam. I think there's also been an occasion whereby a matter in a ward is considered to be member-led, and I have experienced a situation where, in view of the fact it was member-led, the officers were it was deemed not to be appropriate for them to attend, where it would have been extremely important from a ward perspective. So I just wonder if there's a way we can reflect that. Councillor Giusti?
I was nodding in agreement, Chair.
I'm not sure if we've really got a way around it, because it goes to sort of the fundamental relationship between members and officers, and also the chief being the head of paid service in terms of the legislation. So I don't know if there's anything further I could add.
I mean, either, and then I'll...
Chair, I don't know, is it set down in statute that the chief has the right to veto? If it isn't, just remove that line out of the protocol.
That's not set down in statute, but it is set down in statute. He is the head of paid service, and the officers all report to him. Not to members, although members serve the council and they serve councillors in terms of their employment status, and in terms of any directions they come from the head of paid service being the chief executive. So I think that's quite a difficult one.
Members, I suppose just in summary that we are refreshing this protocol, and it will be brought to the attention of members that if we do feel that things aren't running in the way that we'd want, we have got this mechanism that we can go towards.
I think I'm not opposed to it being in there. I think what I struggle with is that if there's a veto in place that for an officer to attend political group meetings, I think that it goes against sort of the spirit of some of the other points of the member officer protocol. And I also think that it needs to be more transparent if the attendance of an officer at a political group meeting is rejected. And I think that the protocol needs to be a bit fairer to elected members. Elected members would deserve an explanation as to why. And I think that certainly if there is a rejection, I would expect that it's for a day. I can understand first thing on a Monday morning, if something's happened over the weekend, at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, maybe actually you can understand why, but you would certainly expect that there would be some sort of secondary, almost to compensate for the attendance at a political group meeting to be rejected. And I think that either it's removed, like I've suggested, or there's something else inserted, to sort of to be a bit fairer to elected members that, yeah, okay, it can be rejected, but actually we'll do all we can to make sure that there's something in place to support members.
Thank you, Chair. This has obviously, been in place for a long time, and maybe it doesn't even quite reflect what happens now, the way that requests are made. So I wonder if we write something in about requests, being made to directors, and a suitable explanation given to members if that were not going to be the case, if they were not going to be attended, or for the director to attend in the place of the officer or the head of service as appropriate. There maybe could be some wording change there, but that would still allow the possibility that officers may not be able to attend, but at least an explanation would be given.
Members, is that a suggestion?
So just for the benefit of members, where would that be inserted? Is that how would that be an additional?
It could delete the last line and instead just prescribe how invitations should be made and who they should be made to, and as in directors, I think would be appropriate. And that if the officer requested wasn't going to be allowed to attend or couldn't attend, that a suitable explanation or an explanation is given to the political group.
Because ultimately, here today, this subcommittee is making a recommendation to full council, so we're not determining anything here today. But it sounds like this is something that we should be a bit more subtle about, because obviously whatever has happened in the past isn't really relevant for today and tomorrow. It's just like, well, that's what we did then, it worked, but obviously things have changed. So if we can capture, I'd be quite happy to capture that if that's a motion, or if we're in agreement to do that.
Just to confirm then, I've captured that you're amending protocol, removing the last sentence of 3.2 and replacing with wording that perhaps more captures how things happen today. Requests made to directors and suitable explanations provided where it's not possible for that to happen.
Are members agreed? With that agreement then, can we go to the recommendations for...
Just on another section of it, in 4.8 I see there's a lot of references to legislation and decisions that have been made by the council, although I don't see any reference made to GDPR regulations. And I've just wondered if they would actually feature there, sort of to bring it up, completely up to date.
Thank you for that point. I'm not aware. I did check that this particular piece of legislation hadn't been repealed by the GDPR, and it hadn't. But I think it's a good point that you make, that maybe we should make more of GDPR in this part of the guidance. And as a point for members, we are going to be arranging training for members on GDPR around about March time. We've got possible dates now. So that would help with case management and requests such as this.
I think that would be useful. It was my understanding that basically, you know, if we're in a meeting of full council, or indeed in this meeting, and we couldn't raise a constituents example and name them without actually having written consent from them, or at the very least some form of verbal consent. So I think that it's important that that is reflected in there, because my reading of that was that basically, you know, if my understanding of GDPR is correct, then it's not actually reflected in that part of the guidance.
So, Rona, can we? I'm just wondering how that's going to be incorporated and where that would go.
I think this section perhaps does not. It was written with a view to the written inquiries or the telephone inquiries that we'd have from members, rather than it being brought up in a particular case in a meeting. But happy to perhaps after before 4.7 and the 4.8 as exists there, I'll insert a section concerning the requirement to be aware of GDPR provisions, etc. And I'll summarise what those might be.
Thank you, Rona. Members, any more? Can we move? Yes, Stephen.
So obviously that's member officer protocol. I presume we're looking at the media protocol as well as part of these recommendations. So I think there was a wee bit about the Provost of Nithsdale, but it's actually not, it's Dumfries, isn't it? So we wouldn't want to offend anybody not in the respective area. I don't know how that works. It doesn't really affect Annandale too much, but maybe that's something we could be just double checked when we're looking at the media protocol, perhaps.
Absolutely correct, Chair and Councillor Thompson. There's a reference to it on page 38 and 40, one being at the very bottom of page 40, and that will just be changed. This day will be replaced by the Dumfries Borough on each occasion.
Thank you for that, Rona. Members, any more comments? I'd just like to point out on page 18, there's a reference to the BlackBerry. So we're going to take that out. So we're going to word it in a more up-to-date manner. Any further questions? So can we move to the recommendations for item 4? Agreed?
Just, is it an action point or is it a recommendation in terms of the things that we wanted to capture?
Yeah.
Are they actions or recommendations?
You're basically recommending the draft as it is, subject to the amendments that you've agreed, being 3.2 that I've already stated, also including a GDPR reference, and amending the media protocol to replace the references for Nithsdale to Dumfries for the Provost, and as the Chair has just stated, page 18 for the BlackBerry reference to be updated.
Thank you, members. So moving on to item 5. So this is amendments to standing orders. Members are asked to consider the proposed amendments to standing orders, the scheme of administration and delegation to committees, and the scheme of delegations to officers as details in paragraphs, all of those big numbers there, and to make recommendations to full council. Adam.
Thanks, Chair. I think it would be useful when it talks about the video conferencing pilot to understand exactly how it would work. Is it a sort of setting up a sort of second meeting almost, or is it a sort of a screen by screen basis? I think also in 3.1.6 it talks about identifying suitable committees, and I would like to suggest that the Harbour Subcommittee and Enterprise and DG Subcommittee are probably the two best ones to do a pilot on.
Thank you, Adam. Rona.
Thank you, Chair. The ideal solution, I think, would be if we could find a way of putting it through the system that we've got here for members that are in this hall, so that we could have on the screen a split screen or a screen that showed the remote location with the members that are there. That might not be possible. That's the first option, though, that we want to pursue with the suppliers of this equipment. If that's not possible, then we were going to purchase a video conferencing screen and the equipment that you've seen around the region, one of those, so that would perhaps be in a corner of the. It would need to be somewhere that members could see the other members, a bit like you get when you go to COSLA, I think. So we would do that and try and run the meeting that way.
So just from a full understanding, is that a sort of, you would have people remotely logging in from a screen, or would it be sort of something set up in Newton Stewart where people could, where the councillors could join?
Apologies, yes, it would be a specified location. We've got the equipment in Annan, in Kirkcudbright and in Stranraer, so members could go to one of those locations and use what's already there and join in a meeting that's happening within this chamber.
I just think the only part I would say about that is I see sort of improving technologies, maybe a way in which we can encourage councillors of different backgrounds and particularly actually councillors who work. It might make it easier if actually you can join from your screen. There's a lot of organisations now that they hold meetings because you're sitting at your screen joining a meeting. I don't know if there's a potential for that to happen in this pilot of that's maybe the direction of travel that we're heading in.
I think, certainly that's the way that we ultimately should go. I think if you would allow us maybe just to take the first step, the video conferencing, I'm not sure practically how we could allow a number of members to Skype in, for want of a better word, into meetings, and how we keep an eye on who wants to speak and all of that. It required quite a lot of change in how we do our meetings, but I think if we tried this pilot first, then we could move to other technology and think about how others are doing it. Obviously, the councils that are the Western Isles and Shetland have got some experience of this at the moment and can maybe just follow what they do. They've written guidelines that we will certainly take into account. One of them, quite interestingly, was about exempt items, and that they have to get people to declare that there's nobody else in the room when they're dealing with exempt items, etc. So there's a few people have given this quite a lot of thought that I think we can carry on with and try and apply here.
Ivor.
Do we have the necessary infrastructure to actually make sure that there's no glitches? I.e., say we're sitting with two people here and we have two at Newton Stewart Stranraer doing the video conferencing, it glitches and you can't get back within 10 minutes or whatever the standing orders are. Is that meeting finished? Because we have the standing orders. If a meeting doesn't start within a certain amount of time, it's null and void. Now, if that happens midway through a meeting where rather than getting up to go to the toilet, the whole thing shuts down and you're not core it, is that meeting finished?
I think that's a really, really good point, and I think all the other councils we spoke to did say, make no mistake, the technology is what might cause us to have a problem. But I wondered if, and just in response to that point, I wonder if I might suggest that in those circumstances, we write in that we allow the meeting to continue just by telephone. If that happened, then you could easily get a telephone line just to get the meeting finished if there was any business still outstanding.
Adam?
I think I would be a bit iffy of that. Is this a public meeting or is it private?
A public,
Is it public? That's fine. I think that technology is great and all the rest in it, but if you've got one member joining by telephone in a subcommittee even of 7 or 8 people, it's going to become very difficult for actually that member to participate. I think that if they're joining by video conferencing, absolutely fine, but if they're only joining by telephone, I think that that member will feel pretty disenfranchised from the entire meeting, and I don't really think we should head down that way.
Well, I think in response to that then, to Councillor Hislop's original question, then yes, if you weren't quorum because they couldn't join in, then that would have to be the end of the meeting.
Stephen?
Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be terrible if it was a vote by a show of hands and you were on the other end of a phone. You mentioned a couple of locations elsewhere in the region where people could... I mean, I think there is an element of decorum almost about if you're attending a council meeting, you ought to be in a place which is fitting for council business. And I think there is an issue about if it's an exempt item or who else is in the room, or are you washing the dishes, or are you in the pub? You know, it's like, is that... I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case, but I think that's a bit of a leap from where we are now. So I think gentle, slow steps, given that these devices actually let us do electronic voting, but we've never quite making full advantage of that. But so given that we're going to test it with 2 subcommittees, I don't think we should go anywhere near a service committee until we've really proved that it can work and the technology is there. And just on the technology, I'm aware that, I mean, schools have a lot of video conference facilities. Would they not be suitable venues as well, given the amount of investment we've put into that and given that they're council buildings?
The proposed locations that I've discussed with the BTS at the moment are in Sun Street in Stranraer, in the customer service facility in Kirkcudbright. It must be in the main council offices, I think, there. And in Annan, and the Annan one isn't set up and running yet, but the equipment is there. So those are the proposed locations for this pilot.
Ivor?
Could we not use the bunker facility for the trial just to see how it works, rather than investing in something in here and then finding, well, it's not really what we want, whereas we have the video conferencing in the bunker. You could hold that as the main sort of place and then use these for the 2 months, and then if it's a success, then we can go out and actually purchase equipment if we need it.
A few difficulties with that, in that the bunker, I believe the emergency team is moving into the bunker full time, so that wouldn't necessarily be available to us. We've also obviously record meetings in this room. I don't know how easy we would have to get our mobile recording equipment out, but it's something we could certainly consider for the subcommittees, and as long as the public were given warning of where they were going to be, means taking them into the bunker where there's obviously some quite sensitive materials, etc. But nothing we probably couldn't work round.
Stephen?
Just by sort of following logical examples, so none of us could be here apart from Rona and Claire. Would the chair have to be, so what would be the minimum requirement for who would attend the meeting? Because you could have some unusual situations.
We certainly don't envisage that everyone would be. We thought at least people that lived in or around Dumfries would still come into the Dumfries facility. But all the advice from the other councils was that it just cannot work without the chair being in the main facility with the lead officer and the clerk.
I think there is research regarding universities have been doing this. The Open University particularly have been doing this for many years, and I actually managed to chair an exam board when I was on video, because we just got used to it. But I think there does have to be some understanding of the protocol of the behaviour of everybody when there's a video, and that's available with the technology. So. Yes, Ian. Sorry.
So that's sort of the video conferencing bit. But I'm aware there's like a number of sections within this report, so
Yeah.
I take it we're just taking them one by one. Okay, that's fine.
Ian.
For following them through as they're written here, because I was going to jump on to 4, 3, 8. But I don't know if anyone wants to get in before me, before we get to the common good. And
Take it in order, make it easier.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if there's any items before we get to there, more than happy to give way.
Ivor.
I suppose it's the next one, membership of committees. Would it be possible to extend substitution to membership of committees so that we could always make sure there's at least a quorum if there's a reason why a lot of people couldn't attend?
Rona, extending membership of committees.
It's something for members to discuss and decide. I am aware that most councils, or at least a large number, that I've conferred with Nick Evans on this from his experience down south, that substitutes, he's never known that substitutes wouldn't be allowed on all committees, but there was a change in our standing orders a few years ago that they only be subcommittees, so entirely a matter for members to decide what they want to recommend to full council.
Adam?
I think, to the best of my knowledge, we've never had a situation where a committee has never actually had a quorum to begin. And I think that there would be I would have a concern about having substitutes on the main service committees, considering the level of business being considered. At all of the service committees, I think that members who opt to sit in those committees, sit in the Labour group, we have a serious discussion. If you have other work commitments, how many committees can you seriously attend? And I think that that's a very honest and open discussion between group officers and individual councillors. As well, when you're sitting on a committee, you quickly learn the ropes. You learn the sort of nitty-gritty details of those committees, and allowing substitutes on those committees, I think, kind of takes away from having a little bit of more expertise on the particular service area that individual councillors hold as members of those committees. I think that's just one area where I would be a bit concerned about substitutes on the main service committees.
David?
While we're talking about the membership of committees, it would be just good for me to know when we'll be discussing, again, how many committees there should be and what these committees are actually doing. Bearing in mind we've had committees quite recently with enormous agendas that were only reports and no decision making taking place, and quite a lot of other issues that I'd like to raise that I won't trouble you with at the moment. But will there be any kind of review of the meeting and committee structure coming along?
There's nothing planned, but it's for this committee to make any recommendations that it wishes. I would suggest, therefore, we would organise another meeting of this subcommittee in the new year, where I could bring back the scheme of delegation to committees. If there's anything particular that you want to discuss, then there's always the recommendations then to full council. We've got obviously a committee structure that's very much based around the directorates that we have at the moment, and you need to think about how that worked. And you've got members and officers aligned to those, so it's no small task, I think, to think it through. But if there's specific concerns, we can always bring those papers to another subcommittee for consideration.
Yeah. Andrew, then Adam.
Thanks, Chair. It's not so much a question, but just a point on the back of what Adam said, while I understand what he means by substitution, the individual member who isn't actually on the committee might not really fully grasp that committee, but in the event of actually trying to get experienced councillors who are good at making decisions and who might be on that committee someday, it's perhaps good that we do allow people to substitute. And I think that it's probably vital that we allow this.
You're always welcome to listen to any committee, councillor.
I think I just wanted to touch on the delegations to committees. Obviously, I mean, it was agreed at the very first full council meeting, if I remember rightly, after the election. And I think there has actually been some changes to the delegations to committees, since in particular to area committees, if I'm right in saying. I think that we have to be very careful. I mean, there's a long list of delegations to different committees. I think that if we're going to revisit it through this subcommittee, it needs to be on the basis of actually changing specific delegations, because I think that, you know, people may have some issues, they may want some things changed, although I think that in the whole, they will agree with the delegations committees. There'll just be particular ones that people would like changed, and I think that for this subcommittee to consider those, it's the specific ones need to be identified by members before it's brought to the subcommittee. Also, on another note, I think that it's actually going through the Transformation Board, and maybe we should actually hold off until the sort of middle of next year to actually seriously consider them as, you know, if there's a change to committees through the Transformation Board, depending on budget setting, then there may be a change to committees. And not to preempt anything, but it's maybe something to consider.
It may be an idea we could have an initial meeting in January and then maybe have another one later in the year.
I think even to have an initial meeting in January, the particular delegations that elected members would like to see a change to need to be identified, you know, because you could sit the whole delegations to committee in front of us, and it'd probably be long, you know, a considerable document. In the whole of that, I can't imagine that any elected member wants to see the whole thing ripped up and started again. So it's why we need to identify the individual delegations that people want to see a change to.
So some pre-work to do.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to take any concerns on particular things from members and produce a report. And certainly, how they often come about is that we just notice that we have a gap. For instance, that, you know, the gap at 4.1, when an issue came up about twinning, we looked through the delegations and discovered there was no delegation for twinning anymore. So these things often just come up in working through certain pieces of business. So anything that's caused particular concern recently or you think's not properly covered, I'd be happy to take those on board and to bring some suggestions to the committee later in the year. As Councillor Wilson said, perhaps not a bad idea to wait till after budget setting and after transformation proposals are decided.
Thank you, Rona. Ivor?
I take it there's sort of split view in the substitute thing, so would it be possible to recommend that there was a split view on it, or rather than going to a vote to full council when it comes to deciding that, so that, because full councils will take the decision, so if we could suggest that might be something to look at. The other thing, could you deem adequate time to prepare? Because 500 and whatever 39 pages, plus any background materials you need to get hold of, you get it on a Thursday and you're in on a Tuesday, struggle to get access maybe Saturday, Sunday. It's quite a lot for members to sort of do, and maybe whether a paper that size should actually come to a committee rather than coming, maybe we need every month rather than every 2 months.
I think, drawing from personal experience, a paper that size is fine. What's not fine is if you've got a paper that size on a Tuesday, you've then got your area committee on a Wednesday, and then you've got another committee with a paper that size on a Thursday. You know, trying to read 3 sets of papers in one weekend is pretty challenging. If you've got one, at least you've got half a chance of being able to read the whole thing with a bit of justice.
I think this ties in with a number of things. The best value review obviously made some recommendations about committee papers, and I think the response that I've put forward on that is that we must be a lot more proactive in our pre-meetings and, looking at what's on the agenda and what's the size of the papers are, and if that's the time to say, these are not all going just now, and these reports, some of these are not necessary. A lot of the reports that you get are for noting, and that's something that creeps in now and again to committees. I'm sure the more experienced members will know that we go through a cycle of saying we're only having reports that are for decisions, and then gradually noting reports creep in again, and I think that agenda did have a number of noting reports on it.
David.
Yes, Chair, quickly, because it's not exactly the membership or the substitution, but I just did remember that at this meeting there was a councillor came through from Stranraer and wanted to speak, and then the chair thought he couldn't speak, and it wasn't really an edifying experience because the press were there, and so I thought the will of the room was let him speak, and I don't know whether we should revisit the rights of a member to actually speak, because it just didn't look good.
Yeah, at the moment it's at the chair's discretion, and that's the way it is. So if members want to discuss that point, and I'm quite happy to amend anything that we have, or suggest an amendment.
Are you suggesting an amendment, David?
If that's competent, yeah. I think I'd like to see if there's anybody who's got anything else to say, because there are obviously unforeseen circumstances.
I just wanted to ask, can we deal with the membership and substitution committees and then talk about that? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we'll go through the rest of the items, but we will come back to that, David. So any more about the membership of committees? Stephen.
So just on this seems to read that a member taking part in a committee at 3.2.1 should have adequate time to prepare, and that basically 24 hours is enough before the start of a meeting. Is that enough? Would be my first question, given what we've just heard. If this is to do with membership of a committee, and I presume that means service committee. Obviously, the substitutes thing at 3.2.3, again, should that be if you're getting substitute onto a committee where we've already determined that you need 24 hours at least to be fully appraised of at least the papers for that particular committee, would there be a consistency issue there, or is a substitute this just there for the votes, really? Do you know what I mean? So, would we be consistent in setting one time frame but just saying, somebody else can substitute for that with no time limit on it? Do you know? So I'm not really. I think we need to be careful about how consistent we're being with this if we're serious about it. So that's maybe just a thought there. Although, to be fair, there's 3 substitutes in this committee, and all of them are proving themselves very useful additions to the committee. So it sort of makes an argument against the benefit of having substitutes. Do you know what I mean? But that's just another wee point. But
no, I think these are all good points that have been made. I always take the view it's up to an individual member to decide whether they're adequately prepared and what's adequate preparation. I wouldn't be seeking to put anything down in stone. I think every individual picks up information differently, and can have their own way of doing that in preparation for a committee. The suggestion of 24 hours was just a suggestion. It could be a shorter period, taking into account that given that we don't have substitution on service committees, someone could take ill, and they might know they're going to be ill for quite a long time. So, as in weeks. So, is that inappropriate? There should be that sort of substitution at that time, so that the time could be less, as long as it's adequate that they can get word to the proper officer that there has been a substitution, and that's what we need. We need an email saying there's been a substitution.
Adam?
I hate to open up a can of worms here, but obviously we're talking about substitution and saying, if someone's ill, but actually nowhere in our standing orders do we actually accommodate for carers. any female that's on maternity leave, any male that wants to go on paternity leave, and how we allow for them to either take part or not take part in committees. And I think that if we're going to stray away from just substitution and changing the membership, we actually need to have a full and comprehensive set of standing orders that allow for, any paternity or maternity or carers leave that would be required. So I think we either agree today to defer this and look at that, or we agree to either take a view on substitutions and sort of this just, you're a member of a committee or you're no member of a committee, and if you decide to change membership committee, you're no back on for 6 months, or we look at all these eventualities.
Yep.
I mean, I see the direction that you're going with that, but I think, the very first item on any committee paper is usually the Sederunt and apologies. And the first option that any member has is to provide their apologies for the meeting because they can't attend, for whatever reason, and there's many. And it's quite a common, in fact, most committees that you attend, there will be one apology. There's very few members, meetings are fully subscribed. It doesn't necessitate that a substitute must attend or that a new member must be allocated. That's often a political or a practical decision for another reason. So I think that provision is already there in the fact that we have a Sederunt and apologies. You just give your apologies. It's quite routine. So I think we're in danger of, I think there's a risk that we might be starting a big review when actually we've already got a very simple method of dealing with that, which is just you submit your apologies. But that's just, maybe that's my view. So I think we've got enough to deal with here. But
so I think, are there any more comments about membership of committees? Adam?
I think we just have to agree, which I'm quite happy to move that we just go with what's in the paper, and that we have we sort of amend current standing orders so that there's a time limit of 24 hours to notify a change of committee, a change of membership of committee.
Everybody, yeah. So are we making an amendment then?
Basically just going with the recommendation when it comes to membership of committee.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on then to twinning. Anybody, any comments about twinning? So we'll add that to, oh sorry Ivor.
If Brexit comes in, will we need it?
Shall we speak in April the 1st, Ivor, about that? Licensing. Any comments? Common good. Ian?
Next year, coming to 4.3.8, disposal of properties, community involvement in decisions regarding them, including identification of how they to be disposed of. What is envisaged with community involvement, and what weighting will be given to that by the members on that? Because on occasions, the members may totally disagree with what's coming forward from the communities. I just want to know how extensive is it envisaged that consultation will be? What will it comprise of? Is it satisfactory to go with the community council? Or how far, and to what extent, and ultimately who's going to pay for such consultation?
No, we waited a long time on the Scottish Government guidance on the consultation, and the consultation is the community councils, and the other provision is relevant community groups. So I think we've done quite a good job with communities each time we've had one, particularly on the community asset transfer side, not necessarily it being common good, but it's a similar principle of identifying groups and getting the word out. Does anyone have any objections or what else they would see? So it doesn't have to be really much more than letting them know what's proposed, but they have to have their say on it. And yes, it's always possible that members, having taken that into account, they're not obliged to follow the community feedback. That all they've got to do is make sure they take it into account in considering what's before them and coming to a decision. And there's obviously, for the community asset transfer process, there's an appeals process, so that would come in to play afterwards.
I believe there was a community asset transfer where a community group has been given a year to come forward with a business plan, which seems a very long time for them to come forward with a business plan. And I'd have concerns that you go through your year, and lo and behold, at the end of 9 months and they don't get it, another group comes up and says, we'll put a business plan in. And you're going to be another 18 months down the road. So I have concerns about that, whether that's appropriate for today's business, or maybe that's something we can speak of.
Adam, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just think on that point, I'm not aware of any community asset transfers where they've been sort of given a year to come forward with a business plan. So my understanding is that any community asset transfers have been, particularly in my neck of the woods, a year to find funding, something that I disagree with, but I wouldn't air those views today, so I think it'd just be useful to get a bit of clarity on what that situation was.
I'll certainly get in touch with the relevant officer, and I'll come back to you all with what that one particular one was. Happy to do that.
Ivor?
I was on the common good part, the finance. It says there that finance officer would not attend meetings on a regular occurrence. I think they should, going by the fact that 2 years in a row the figures for Nithsdale were wrong. One went to the auditors and the auditors said they were fine, never paid any attention to the accounts. This year's were wrong because, well, didn't realise that they'd taken the wrong figures out and they didn't add up, so they just sent it through, and if some of us hadn't counted it up, we would have been agreeing books that didn't balance. So I think there is times when they should be there at least once a year. That would be the end of year report, to make sure that if it doesn't add up, they can tell us why it doesn't add up.
Can we amend this to having an annual presence?
Certainly happy to recommend that, and obviously the head of finance and procurement will get an opportunity to be consulted on that and come back with anything.
Adam?
I think on that point there needs to be some sort of room for discretion. I understand that Dumfries Common Good, that there's a number of financial transactions, although there's some common goods that, you know, the numbers on the page speak for themselves, and understandably there's occasions in Dumfries Town, you know, Dumfries Common Good, I can understand you would want a finance officer there. There are some common goods where actually the numbers are pretty self-explanatory, and I think that some discretion would probably be the best way forward.
In that case, would you be happy that I suggest that we leave the recommendation as it is for all of the common goods except for Nithsdale, and that a request be made that at the end of year report that a finance officer is present?
Ian?
Chair, just in the matter of substitutes, it was certainly, as chair, I was on the understanding that there was you couldn't substitute. So perhaps it might be an idea for all chairs of common good committees to be advised that substitutes are permitted.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. It was, I think it was this subcommittee that recommended it be changed, and it was taken to full council, but I don't think it's been communicated as widely as it should have been and understood, so I think that's a good idea. We'll action that.
That's an action. Community council representatives? Stephen?
Yeah, so, I mean, this, just on the common good and the financial officer being there, I welcome, I think there should be a quarterly, at least paper report, just so that even if it's a small fund, at least you can track and monitor it, and then obviously if there's a larger, significant financial transactions going on, then the larger common goods. I'm just sort of thinking, are we missing Sanker? Are we just specifying Dumfries Common Goods Subcommittee as requiring a finance officer? Because I gather that there'll be other common goods In fact, I'm sure Kukubri, if I'm not mistaken, has quite a large financial. So does that mean that shouldn't have a finance? I mean, I'm just wondering about the consistency about that. So, yeah, so so are we including some kind of factoring in of where there is a large financial element, rather than specify it's only Dumfries, because that will read a certain way to members who don't live in Dumfries. But just to maybe say that discretion is there to any common good subcommittee where there's a significant financial activity, for example. And secondly, just on community council representation, clearly what we're looking to agree here is to establish common good subcommittees where there wasn't one before, where there's significant assets and or finances. And normally at common good subcommittee meetings there's community council representation. Where that fails and there isn't one established, then the area committee would be the default determining body, but that provision for allowing community council members should be then afforded to that item on the area committee agenda. That would seem to be sort of somehow consistent, so at least we've got representative input into that particular report. Would that be fair comment? I'm not sort of sure. I'm looking to the officers there for maybe a wee bit of guidance on that.
Yeah, I think that's why we put it on the agenda, that there's inconsistency, not only across, as you say, across the area committees, the way they deal with it, but yes, if they're allowed to input, if it had its own subcommittee, why would you not allow them to input on an agenda item only that's about common good on an area committee?
Ivor.
But surely common good business should go to subcommittee, therefore they make a recommendation and it comes to the area committee. Why would you?
The difficulty is we have some funds that don't have their own common good subcommittee, so they go to the area committee automatically. There's no meeting, they just go to the area committee. So that's been part of the problem. Yeah. And it's an ongoing problem.
I thought we were going to set up subcommittees for them all, so therefore it wouldn't be a problem then.
We will still have some that would have they wouldn't have a committee. So if there was any business, it would go to area committee. So it's only those ones that we're suggesting that the community council reps would participate in if there was business at the area committee. But you're right, we should probably make it clear that if it's an item that's been already at the subcommittee that's referred to the area committee, then that would not be appropriate. That's a good.
Any more comments about that? And civic government licensing? No further comments? Yes, Stephen.
I did want to just re-emphasise, it was at 4.3.8, just in terms of common good property and the transparency about the existence of common good assets. Now, I know I've sort of asked for it for a while, just about it should be publicly available, and I know it's on the website that we keep a register of assets as per the requirements of the legislation, but for common good subcommittee meeting papers which are published and are of course of interest to the local residents of that particular borough and the community councils, etc., I would sort of re-emphasise and reiterate my request that the common good assets for that area are published along with the papers, because there may be ones that we subsequently discover and then we can add to that list, etc. So, because it has come up, well, people don't even know what assets are common good within their borough, or there's so as our knowledge improves, we should be publishing that on the public papers, if that's what the intention of this is to do.
Yeah, Rona.
No, I think that's a good idea, and it's not something that would require a lot of work. That the list there's minor amendments made to it occasionally for each common good. Therefore, I think we're quite happy we can action that quite easily.
Any further comments? So just to go back to the recommendations, and that we've agreed to consider the amendments and make these recommendations to full council, but I'll just pass over to Claire for some of the actions.
Okay, thank you. Basically, you've gone with the recommendations as were in the report. The two subcommittees that you're putting forward for the video conferencing pilot are Harbour Sub and Enterprising DG. There was discussion on the use of substitutes at main committees. I'm thinking that it's perhaps something you would want to feature in a report back at some point in the future. There was obviously discussion as well about looking at the scheme, but that Rona will have any members who raise concerns with Rona, and we'll look at that after the budget setting and the transformation board.
Yes, there was talk of an amendment, the SCOBY rule or whatever, because I'd raised that incident that occurred, and I don't know if it's possible to have my grammar corrected, but I've written here an elected member who is not a member of a committee should have the automatic right to speak at a meeting of that committee for a maximum of 2 minutes on up to 2 items.
Yes, thank you. You're raising Standing Order 17.3, where a member has the right to address a committee where they're not a member, subject to the agreement of the chair. Again, that could possibly be something that comes back in a future report.
Sorry, Dan.
I don't agree. I think that we have to appreciate that obviously service committees are having reports that big, that long. A number of reports are going through committee once or twice, sometimes 3 times. Particular items that have been of interest to me in EI have also been in other committees, they've been in been in Swestrans, for example, and that standing order should remain as they are. I think that individually councillors need to consider that EI committee lasts until about 4 o'clock, which is a pretty long day to begin with. If there's a report that has got a recommendation with something that you agree with, and what you want to see happen is that recommendation, is there really a need for you to have up to, I can't remember how much the time limit is to speak? Somebody said to me, pardon? Is it 2 minutes currently, Claire?
Doesn't actually specify a time in the standing orders.
So you could have somebody rambling on for 5 minutes, and if that's 2 items, you get a couple of members, you could quickly be adding on 15-20 minutes. And I think that individual councillors need to themselves consider, are they making an argument that's contrary to what is on the papers in front of members? Because we do need to consider if there's a set of papers that are taken to 4 o'clock to get through, if you're going to say exactly what's going to be done, is there a need for you to speak? Because there's a number of other avenues for you to raise concerns. You can speak to any member beforehand, you can speak to council officers after the publication of those committee papers, but also before. There's plenty of ways to air your views. Now, certainly, if there's a committee paper and you disagree with something that's been recommended, or you want to see a different course of action, absolutely, ask the chair to speak. We should no way be stopping that. But sometimes, in some of the length of committee papers, as a councillor, I've considered, do you know what? Actually, that's a very long agenda. What I'm going to argue for is exactly what that recommendation is. And I think it's about actually just considering exactly. What are you going to say and what is the outcome of that committee? Are you going to change it or not?
David, then Andrew.
Yes, I think there are many ways to reduce this type of report down, this type of document down. There were no actual votes on the day there at all. And to leave it up to the discretion of the chairman it's not ideal, and it didn't look ideal on the day, and I was only asking for 2 minutes for a person to present their views.
Thanks, Chair. I disagree. I think that an elected member is voted in by the people, is elected to actually, or he or she are elected to represent in the way they feel fit. And if they feel that they should talk to a committee, then they should have the right to. And I mean, we talk about a 4 o'clock finish for that committee. Most folk go out and work 9 till 5. Our committee starts at 10:30 till 4. It's not a long working day.
Adam.
No colours about the 9 till 5 working day, but I think that we're underestimating the ways in which a councillor makes a difference on behalf of their constituents. Sometimes actually the most effective way of making a change for your constituents is not coming to a committee and having a vote or having a say. It's actually working behind the scenes. It's speaking to council officers. It's speaking to people on the ground. And sometimes I think that those methods are undervalued. Now, absolutely, if you've tried that and that hasn't worked and there's something on the papers that you disagree with and you want to see change, absolutely. And a chair should not be then saying, no, because I disagree with you, you're not going to have a say. It's a chair's discretion. But I think that there comes a point where if what is on the papers is what you agree with, and you're not wanting to see a change from that, individual members themselves should just think, am I going to realistically make a huge change to what is actually going to happen anyway? And have I used every other method? And I'm not saying that that alternative views or anything should be quashed. I'm just saying that there comes a point when we have to consider, am I going to change exactly what's going to happen as a result of this committee? Or am I actually, do I really need, yes, I do really need to speak because actually what's on those committee papers I disagree with.
Adam, thank you. I will ask David and then Andrew, but I'd also like to point out this is not on the papers for today for discussion, but that doesn't mean it could come in at a future date. So David, Andrew.
Councillor Wilson said that the member should that. Well, yes, that's alluding to the fact it should be the member's choice, and the member would feel quite hard done by if the chairman of a different party said you can't speak on the matter. And I come all the time to meetings. In fact, I've come to every meeting I could have come, and I've affected, obviously, zero change, but I have had a say. And the councillor in question had 2,000 votes behind him, and he isn't independent. He made the judgment it was worthwhile, and I think it should be at his discretion rather than the chairman. The risk is limited when we limit the time, so there is no risk.
Chair, one of the arguments is that the papers were in favour of what the member believed. The papers and the recommendations and the noting or whatever we are given in the paper, that's a live document. That's subject to change. Members on that day could have completely done the opposite. And just because it's in the papers as a recommendation, and he agrees with that, or they agree with that, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go that way.
Claire, you want to come in?
Yeah, I've nothing really to add. Just that obviously the subcommittee is just at this stage recommending to full council, so it's for full council to ultimately determine.
Ivor.
Could I suggest we put this on to January's meeting as well for a way forward?
Thank you very much, Ivor.
I'm just worried we're going to have to prepare the papers.
Stephen.
It was just, I don't want to get into a normative debate about what members ought to do, because we're all 43 entitled to be quite autonomous about how we go about our business, as long as we kind of adhere to the what we're bound by. But I think there is something, in fact, ironically, I'd probably say it would be better maybe if there was a timescale put on that request by the member to the chair of the committee, because I'm not saying that the chair shouldn't have discretion, and what that means, it's up to the chair. But a lot of the time the chair does allow members to speak, and sometimes they don't. It's up to the chair. That's just the way it is. But sometimes there's a bit of a last minute pressure, which I think is maybe unfair in terms of the fact that papers will have been published. We're already looking at setting a minimum timescale for members to be even on the committee. So the fact that a member has got up to right the very last minute to the committee starting at 10:30 or whatever, I think if anything, we should allow a period of notice for the member to actually make that request to even be considered by the chair, to sort of strengthen that. So maybe that's something that we can feed into the January report or consider along with everything else in the round.
Adam, then Andrew, and then I think...
Thanks. That is a sensible suggestion I think should be included in the papers for January. I understand, absolutely, if a council of a different party is asking a chair of who is in a different party, and that's refusing, I can understand that there's concerns there, absolutely. However, if you have a time frame and you engage in a conversation with the chair, I know that the chair of that particular committee took phone calls from numerous councillors that week about agenda items because we're very heavy, some very important issues there. If there's a conversation and and the chair is actually the same opinion. You know, if I had a conversation with the chair about an item on that particular agenda, he agreed with me. I then considered, well, actually, I'm not going to waste a couple of your minutes arguing for something that, you know, certainly the chair agreed with anyway. So, you know, it was about give and take. Had the chair said, no, I disagree with you, then absolutely I would have went along and made my case. So I think that a time limit is probably a sensible suggestion, because I think that, you know, to alleviate the concerns that have been raised by other members, but also to try and come to a middle ground on sort of what I'm saying, maybe actually a time limit is a good idea, and maybe 24 hours or something, to make sure that actually that conversation happens. You know, because if a conversation happens between an individual member and a chair, and they do come to an agreement that actually they both agree with the same thing, then, you know, it reduces that need for a person to come and address a committee for something that's going to happen.
David, then Andrew.
I wasn't actually going to come in, but I thank you. No, I think it's totally wrong. I think this, you know, I love them or hate them, but people, we all represent the community, and we have to have the chance to come in up to the last moment and speak and represent our constituency, no question. And I just thought, you know, we don't have any spectators. It's no wonder we don't have any spectators here, you know. But that would be in addition to democracy, and any audience or member of the public that was attending would think, yeah, my man, or that was the view from Stranraer. It was heard on the day and not suppressed, which it looked like suppression on the day. Whether or not he had anything valid to say, I can't say, but we should have heard him.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that was mentioned there was a time period of 24 hours or so. But one of the things that comes into my mind is the member is generally going to want to talk to someone that they generally know. They know the subject. They know the matter. Otherwise, they'll just come to waffle. But so if they're focusing on one item, now I've deduced this. We're saying that it's all right to have papers for 24 hours beforehand, and that means that you're all right to sit on a committee and you can understand the papers. Well, if you divide that paper, a 21 item paper, between 24 hours, that's 1.14 hours per item. So I bet we put a timing of 1.14 hours before a member can speak at committee then.
Be gentle with the equipment, that costs money. But thank you very much for your input, Councillor. So, Claire, can we just summarise what we're actually going to do for bringing this to the January meeting?
Okay, I think I'd run through most of the points that have been raised for this item in general, and we're just basically just looking at the options for 17.3, standing order 17.3. Come back to January, looking at, obviously can't preempt what's going to say because we haven't really looked at it, looking at whether that would actually need amended, looking at timescales for approaching the chair, yeah, just a discussion really for that standing order to come back.
Thank you very much, members. So can we just recommend that the amendments to standing orders, the scheme of administration and delegation to committees, and the schemes of delegation to officers as detailed in these paragraphs, and that we're recommending that this go to full council? Yes, Adam.
Can we just double check?
Just summing up there.
I'm helping you to sum up. Can we just double check the changes that we're making? Because I think we've had a lot of discussion. I think it'd be just clear to know exactly what's going to happen to each of those discussion points. The recommendation is a little bit, this is the changes that are going to happen, but I don't think they're specifically detailed in the paper.
I think basically you went through each of the recommendations in the report. We'll make sure that it's clearly minuted, so each one's expressed fully. And you're recommending, as I said, for video conferencing the two subcommittees, Harbour Sub and Enterprising Sub. Membership of committees, you went with the recommendation in the report. Twinning, fine, licensing, common good. There's obviously a bit of discussion there about how that related with the community asset transfer policy, but that was more just for information to come back to individual members. And finance, Yes, the attendance by the finance officer. Basically, this was subject to discretion, but particularly when there's significant financial activity, and so noting that it may be appropriate for Dumfries Common Good that this would be annual. Again, the went with recommendations for the community council reps. That's about it, really. Information to come back about Standing Order 17.3.
There was just the point about the publishing of common good assets for each common good.
Thank you very much, members. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sure I will enjoy my journey home.